All right, guys, what's up? I'm Cody McKibben, and again, we are going to continue our series here on Joseph Campbell, the hero with 1,000 faces. I'm joined by my juicy bros, Rico and Eric. Thank you guys as always. So, last time we really delved into that, the myth of the Minotaur, right? Who sits at the center of this labyrinth, and it's kind of, in my mind, it represented both this threat and opportunity, I guess. That's really kind of underpins like ourselves, the psyche, but also society, right? And then I just wanted to, before we dive into the next little bit here, today we're going into the next chapter called Tragedy and Comedy, but I wanted to repeat that last couple lines from the chapter before where Campbell says, "We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path, and where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find a god. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outward, we shall come to the center of our own existence. Where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world." So before we dive into tragedy and comedy, did you guys, over the last couple of days, any other reflections or just thoughts about the process so far going into this? I mean, we're only like 20 some pages in, but yeah, what have you gotten so far out of this intro to the monomyth and thinking about these pretty deep, sometimes abstract concepts?
To me, it just kind of goes over the way, in my opinion, like how every human has something within them that's, I guess, kind of beastly, that they don't want anybody to see outwardly. They're trying to hide from everybody else, and how this goes in and tries to, you've got to pretty much, I guess, condition yourself, kind of eliminate, I guess, grow yourself above that or something along that. Just trying to better yourself to, I guess, accept it.
Definitely. Yeah, Rico?
I'm going to add to that. Like, I've said this before. It's like a guidebook for life. Some of the Joseph Campbell says here, it's like with all the technology we have, we're still kind of primitive beings. That's deep down our psyche. We still, and we need monomyth and myth and legends, and just to kind of give us an identity of who we are as a human beings. So, because I've actually read a little bit farther into the book here, and he gets a little bit more into it. So that's where I get out of the book, and it's it's really interesting. I'm glad we're doing this.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. It's like, I mean, it doesn't matter how advanced we get. It's like, we're always, not to diminish what we are, because we're quite astounding, but like, we are animals, underneath it all. Like, there is something we share in common with all living things, right? And yeah, like you say, like that primitive thing, whatever we came from, like, we'll never fully escape that, and it is a central piece of what makes us. So that, that's where the emotions come from, and just like the desires to go out and, do things that by modern standards could be pretty unacceptable in one way or another, right? And so, that's a great point, Rico. I think in many ways, like mythology or even religions, I mean, they're, and maybe even like morality itself. It's like, just trying to create a framework or a structure for us to kind of to orient ourselves upward. And like you said, Eric, like try to like that thing is always going to sprout up in the center, that beastly part. Like there's always, if you conquer one, then there's going to be another one, right? Something new will pop up. But to continually strive to become better and improve and grow, I suppose.
I just want to add too, it kind of binds the human race together. We're all different, but we're all the same. We are different, but I shouldn't say all different. We're you know, we all look different. We have different cultures, different religions, but we're all basically the same deep down. You know?
Yeah.
So,
I think so. I agree. Well, so today, like I say, we got tragedy and comedy is the next section here. And yeah, I think, you know, in some way, if you can think of this, you know, all these stories being told through myth, but symbolically or metaphorically, how does it kind of apply to yourself, your inner workings, and yeah, to society at large? I do find this section quite fascinating, and maybe especially in a time like this, you know, when it looks like a lot of the old things are falling apart, like the situations around us could easily be interpreted as tragedy, right? But let's find out, yeah, what Joseph Campbell has to say about tragedy and comedy. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. With these fateful words, Count Leo Tolstoy opened the novel of the spiritual dismemberment of his modern heroine, Anna Karenina, which is a great book. I read it a long time ago, but I don't know if you've read that one. It's highly recommended. Those Russian authors, I don't know, man. They're, good. Anyways, during the 7 decades that have elapsed since that distracted wife, mother, and blindly impassioned mistress threw herself beneath the wheels of the train, thus terminating, with a gesture symbolic of what already had happened to her soul, her tragedy of disorientation, a tumultuous and unremitting, I think it's dithyramb of romances. Actually, I looked that up. Let me see if I got it. Because I was like, what the heck is a dithyramb? It's actually a Greek, it was, you know, in ancient Greek times, yeah, a hymn sung and danced in honor of Dionysus, the god of wine and fertility. So yeah, Campbell is saying, you know, since he points to Anna Karenina as one example, right, of someone who had their soul kind of torn apart by the world, but that since then, you know, there's this unremitting, never-ending sequence of people, like almost, you know, people throughout history have turned this into. I mean, like today we even have the blues still, right? Or whatever, like you know, psalms and songs to try to relieve the pain of existence, I guess, and kind of relieve the suffering that we experience. But yeah, okay. So there's, you know, since then there's been a tumultuous and unremitting dithyramb of romances, news reports, and unrecorded cries of anguish has been going up to the honor of the bull demon of the labyrinth. Yeah, news reports. That's something relevant to today, huh?
yeah.
The wrathful, destructive, maddening aspect of the same God who, when benign, is the vivifying principle of the world. And so, yeah, I think, you know, in this case, he's kind of pointing back to the last chapter, to that Minotaur, and that bull demon of the labyrinth, and how there's kind of almost two sides to it. You know, it represents destruction and new creation, I suppose. Modern romance, like Greek tragedy, celebrates the mystery of dismemberment, which is life in time. Like, that sounds pretty dark, but, you know, there is obviously a universal truth to that. The happy ending is justly scorned as a misrepresentation, for the world as we know it, as we have seen it, yields but one ending: death, disintegration, dismemberment, and the crucifixion of our heart with the passing of the forms that we have loved. So there's a deep beginning for this chapter. What do you guys think? Yeah, it's pretty, a little bit, what's that, Rico?
So it's true.
Yeah. It's like that's our common fate, you know. The one thing we all have in common at the end is, yeah, we're all going to be, you know, this life is terminal, right? Like, we'll all be dead before we
It's the only
lose everything. Yeah, and I do think like that's especially in today's world, right? It's like we have created so many distractions and pleasures, I suppose, for ourselves to kind of to distance ourselves from that harsh reality. And I think a lot of people they you know, though it's counterintuitive, I think a lot of people suffer especially hard because we don't talk about it, we don't look at it, we don't have as many stories, I guess, to cope with that and to come to terms with that reality. What do you think? Like, I think that's a big. That's
I totally agree. I think what's going on right now, especially right now, is it's everything's reversed. And it's like we live in like almost like a falsehood that's trying to shouldn't say fool us, but it's like it's not reality what we're living in right now. We have deep down we're all gonna pass away, and it's it's how do I explain this? Sorry, I'm not good with words. It's like we're being distracted with and when something like happens, we're not going to be ready for it. We're not going to have to deal with it. Like in some cultures, death is celebrated. So, especially in the Western cultures, I should say.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to notice. Yeah, like especially with days past, it's like many, like you say, many tribal cultures, especially many ancient cultures, looked at death as more of a doorway to the next whatever's beyond that. And it's like it was, as you say, more celebrated rather than just, I mean, nobody looks forward to it per se, but it's like you can celebrate it rather than purely just fear it, which I think is a more healthy relationship to develop with death.
Yeah, I guess today so many people are, I guess, just fearful primarily over everything with the idea of death, and it to me it is frightening. You don't ever really know what's beyond. It's just kind of like all unknown. But lots of tribes and I guess older generations is more I guess just another. I mean, they celebrated, not just feared.
Yeah, so I think like that's one of the biggest things that I got out of like really exploring Joseph Campbell's work and getting all into the hero's journey again after 15 years. I think I've shared with you too before on some of our private calls, but I really delved into this. Like I studied this in college, right? But then I really delved into this again about 5 or so years ago when my mother was going through cancer, and as I've told you, like she probably doesn't have much longer for this world, which is very hard to deal with, but I feel a lot more at peace, I guess, with situations like that. And then also looking at my own mortality. I mean, I'm not staring down the barrel of a gun myself at this moment, so it's not as traumatic for me, but it's like I feel like I've developed that healthier conception or relationship with that, so I hope everyone who follows along with us here and delves into this book will get something like that out of this. Okay, so let me dive into the next chapter or the next paragraph. Pity is the feeling which arrests the mind in the presence of whatever is grave and constant in human sufferings and unites it with the human sufferer. Terror is the feeling which arrests the mind in the presence of whatsoever is grave and constant in human sufferings and unites it with the secret cause. And that's from the great Irish James Joyce, author of Ulysses. That's what do you guys follow that? Pity is the feeling which arrests, stops the mind in the presence of something grave and constant and like in the face of death, almost, right? And unites it with the human sufferer. So that's almost like pity. I mean, that word seems to have a bad connotation, I would say, today, but But maybe more like, it's like you can sympathize with another human when you are looking at a situation that unites us. It's like death, right? It's like, yeah, it's something that levels the playing field, I suppose. Yeah, and even if you disagree with someone politically, let's say, or ideologically or whatever, you can have sympathy for them on a human level. And terror is the feeling which kind of stops the mind in the presence of what's grave and constant and unites it with the secret cause. Maybe that's like the secret cause, Yeah, that's maybe talking more about, where do we come from and where do we go? What is that? What does that doorway represent? What is, secret cause. Who knows? Maybe we'll
I was
find
gonna
out.
ask about that, the secret cause. I mean, like, what is it talking about specifically? Just our main terror over everything, or what?
The secret cause, I would say, I think, he will flesh that out as we get deeper into this chapter. So I'll try not to speak for Campbell just yet. I think he'll enlighten us more as he goes. But I guess I believe, that's a quote, like I say, from James Joyce. And I think in my mind, I would position that as, like the secret cause of life, or like the cause behind the world, like the unseen, like what is our source, or where do we go to after we leave this place, or what does it all mean, what's the deeper root or source of life in the world, I think is what he's talking about. And terror, because I don't know, it's like, I don't know why that's terrifying, but I suppose it is, to think that even the thought that there's more to this world than just what we can see and touch is kind of whatever, confusing and scary. I know a lot of people don't like to think about that or admit that maybe that's possible even, right? But let's carry on. Okay, so as Gilbert Murray has pointed out in his preface to Ingram Bywater's translation of the Poetics of Aristotle, tragic catharsis, i.e. the purification or purgation, as he says, of the emotions of the spectator of tragedy through his experience of pity and terror, this tragic catharsis corresponds to an earlier ritual catharsis, a purification of the community from the taints and poisons of the past year, the old contagion of sin and death. Interesting contagion, huh? So he's, I guess, relating that the personal catharsis that I guess maybe that's what I don't particularly like, or I'm not into horror films myself, but some people are really into them, and I could imagine why maybe that gives a certain kind of catharsis, through tragedy. But any kind of suffering, I suppose, like it does entail some kind of personal catharsis, and he's relating that with like ritual catharsis for the community, which was the function of the festival and mystery play of the dismembered bull god Dionysus. So again, maybe a relation back to the Minotaur. And Dionysus was kind of the Greek god of, I believe, of the harvest of wine, of what would they call it? Of festivals and theater and frivolity, like having fun, getting drunk and having fun. And I think also related to, I think it was the Roman version was Bacchus, which some of you may have heard Bacchus, or Dionysus, also represented frequently with the bull god or bull sacrifice. So he's talking about Greek times. The meditating mind is united in the mystery play, not with the body that is shown to die, but with the principle of continuous life that for a time inhabited it, the body. And for that time was the reality clothed in the apparition. at once the sufferer and the secret cause. The substratum into which ourselves dissolve when the tragedy that breaks man's face has split, shattered, and dissolved our mortal frame. So this is getting really deep. So let me know if you guys have questions here. But I mean, it's, yeah, from a mythical perspective, I think Campbell here is pointing out that, yeah, like the I guess a lot of the ancient rites and rituals and festivals, and in some ways even the holidays we still celebrate in many cultures are about this death and rebirth, right? And I guess, yeah, Campbell's trying to point out it's like that it's meant to, or at least its function is to orient the community to realize, yeah, like there's like life itself, is the everlasting spirit. It's like, even though, yeah, we come in our temporary forms and we have our birth and our death and fade away, but life itself keeps going. It's like I've heard someone say something like, we're not just, you're not just you, you're actually the representative or whatnot of like your whole ancestral line, in a sense, and I think like Rico, I remember one of our conversations recently, you had touched on something like that too, like we were talking about what we inherit from our parents or
ancestral DNA.
Yeah, and like even science is talking about it with epigenetics now. It's like, yeah, your DNA itself, you could say, like, if you looked at it from a totally different perspective, which sounds pretty weird, but like the DNA never dies, really. It's like in a weird way, your children were born inside your mother. when your mother conceived you, and then it's just like there's this code, or maybe this animating force, right, that is just carried down from generation to generation. And yeah, like we come and we go, we pass away, but there's something underneath it all, that this animating force, I guess, that lives forever.
Force, like the universe. We're all, I've heard, we're all created from energy, right? According to some religions.
Yeah, I think that's hard to argue. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's we're all one energy kind of thing. And, yes, we're different, but we're all the same. And like, that's what I mean, it's passed down from generation to generation. I'm Italian, so of course Roman. You know what I mean? I've actually done the DNA test, so it's quite interesting to see actually what areas that a person comes from.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think I had something along those lines several years ago too, and I mean, it's fascinating because, yeah, most of us are such a combination of things, people like I have a hard time with the conversation about racism these days, because if you really know anything true, it's like we're all mutts, we're all such a mix.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, yeah, like we are like this representative for our DNA line, or our cultures, or our tribes, quote unquote, in a sense. And I think that I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, wanting to preserve something from those who came before you, from your parents, and their parents and their parents, and I think everyone should do that. But anyhow, so yeah, I hope I'm not getting too off track here, but yeah, that's kind of my frame, I guess, on what he's saying here. It's like, yeah.
Cody, like I was watching a little. Like the Druids in England back in the day, they had the summer solstice. It's kind of the same thing. It's the rebirth, the winter solstice, the death, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a cycle, right?
Yeah.
And the community, it was representative of life, kind of thing. That makes any sense. Like it's every, you know what I mean? Like you got the Druids in ancient England, then you have other cultures. It's all the same, traditions, and that's what I mean when I say everything's passed down. Like our DNA, we're all the same. We're different, but we're all the same. We all pretty much have the same thoughts and fears and everything else.
Right.
So.
Oh yeah, I think that's something that has gone largely forgotten in our modern culture. Is like the relation to. I mean, it all derives essentially from nature, in a sense. Yeah, and like you're pointing out there, I think every culture has these similar patterns, particularly, maybe not only, but particularly because it's unavoidable. You notice it in nature. Like there's the seasons, the cycle of the year, like the crops. Yeah, they die. They have springtime. Everything kind of comes back to life. And so like every year, every time the sun goes, we go around the sun rather, that's like a yearly solar life cycle, if you will. It maps onto this cycle of birth and death, and growth and decay, and you have your planting season and your harvest season, and so in many ways, and that has its relation to human life too. We have it on a longer scale, but there's a lot of parallels, I suppose, and then you have your cultural, your different, unique representations of that, but that makes that because that's kind of the underlying reality of our universe. We do have all these similarities across cultures. Were you going to say something there, Eric?
No, I was going to mention like in Japan, the cherry blossom trees and everything. That's their, I guess, their national type tree, and it signifies the reincarnation. And once you basically you're reborn, and then you slowly start decaying and dying out, then again you're reborn. But I guess you look at it. Basically, every tree that's not an evergreen is going to be doing the same thing, but it's kind of like signifies the cycle of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's patterns in everything in nature. Like you look hard enough, there's patterns everywhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and on the human level, it's like we all experience birth, right, and then we all grow, and I mean, I think we all do have like this inherent desire, at least, to go. I mean, number one, to consume, to survive, right? But also like to reproduce, and not everyone necessarily pursues that, but there is some level of desire deep in our psyche or whatever, right? To produce, and then like to, I mean, whatever. Like you do kind of diminish in a sense, and then we all experience death, and so it doesn't matter what your political leanings are or what culture you come from. Though that's the level at which we are all the same, we all want the same things. We're all on this similar journey, going through these cycles. And so hopefully that gives us, that's why culturally we have these rituals or these symbols or these myths, these stories that we can all kind of gather around, and it may be loosely, but it does tie us together, right? So to go back to Campbell here, he's got something from Euripides, the Bacchae. Appear, whatso thy shape or name, O mountain bull, snake of the 100 heads, lion of the burning flame, O God, beast, mystery come. This death to the logic and the emotional commitments of our chance moment in the world of space and time. So it's like ego death, I suppose, right? It's kind of like, removing. I might relate it here to, the left and right brain paradigm. I think, what is it called? The bicameral mind. It's like the left brain. Yeah, the left brain wants to, and most of us today have been trained and brought up to be very, very, very left brain oriented, especially if you're right-handed, like you're left brain dominant. And so you're looking at concrete, hard facts, and trying to relate to the material world and trying to like zoom in on what's relevant to you right now today, to your survival, career, and just how to get things done, versus the right brain, which they used. I mean, when I was growing up, they said that was like the creativity side, but it's the right brain is what relates to mythology, I would say, and it's always working, even though you might be. It actually, I think it has a lot to do with the unconscious or the subconscious, because it's always looking for bigger patterns. It's the one that's like relates to the very, very, very big picture. It's what's looking out. It's like the eyes in the back of your head. If you're in the jungle and a predator is sneaking up on you, it's the thing that will whisper, and like while you're focused on whatever you're doing, it's like, hey, there's something you need to look out for. It's the pattern recognition in the much bigger picture. And I guess, this death to the logic and the emotional commitments of our chance moment, like this life, this, the concrete, like what getting things done right here today in the world of space and time. I think, the myths and the rituals we have. I mean, even today, right? Everyone talking about like ayahuasca and DMT. I mean, it's like the psychedelic community today is like, what is it really? They're trying to take you out of your left brain, and I think, relate or build your connection to the more right brain, the more unconscious way of relating to the big picture, if you will. Does that kind of make sense? And it's something, it's something that we very rarely do consciously or intentionally, I think, today, with the exception of like, I guess I would say in my circles, it's like this, the people that are into psychedelics, I think that's kind of what they're doing. And that is one way to do it. But traditionally, I mean, even in traditional societies, like I do think, some form of psychedelics or whatever was, maybe not frequently, but it was sometimes involved in some of those ancient rituals and things, or even, the god of wine, alcohol is a form of, a substance that will kind of put you in a different state of mind. So, okay, sorry. That was a little bit of a diversion, but okay, let me go back. This death to the logic and the emotional commitments of our chance moment in the world of space and time, this recognition of and shift of our emphasis to the universal life that throbs and celebrates its victory in the very kiss of our own annihilation, this amor fati, which means love of fate. That's like something, I mean, it's kind of a Stoic maxim. I think these days you hear it among people who talk about Stoicism, but it was also something that Nietzsche was big on. Amor fati, love of the fate that is inevitably death, constitutes the experience of the tragic art. Therein the joy of it, the redeeming ecstasy. So it's like, it sounds kind of fatalistic, I guess, but it's, developing that amor fati, the love of fate, which means like, accept that you're gonna die. It's like Fight Club, you have to know, that you're gonna die. Not, what does he say? What was that line when he's putting the chemicals on the other guy's hand, and he's giving him the chemical burn on his hand? You have to know, not.
This is reality. That's what he was trying to tell him. Like what you're living. To me, because I've actually read that book a couple times, it was like, this is reality. Like you can't. It hurts, and he's like, you're not focusing. Like focus, right?
He's trying to be all Buddhist and breathe and go to his happy place.
Like, that's a bunch of bullshit.
Him across the face.
Yeah.
Let me see.
I was kind of watching Alan getting off. So Alan Watts kind of goes into this a little bit, what we were just talking about, like the fate, right? You have to trust the universe almost. It's preordained what's going to happen to you. Like, so just go with the flow, I guess.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, he says, what's his name? Tyler Durden. First, you've got to know, not fear, know that someday you're going to die. I had to look that up. Yeah, the Chuck Palahniuk, that was a great book, Fight Club. I mean, the movie's great too.
Great too.
Yeah. But I do think there is something to that. I mean, I think in a way, that movie came out when I was like 18 or 19, and it did really resonate with me at the time. And I think there's a lot of good lessons in there. But yeah, there is an even deeper maturity, I guess, to experience. But part of it is that it's like, accepting that you're only here temporarily, and that's kind of grim, but it also, once you truly accept that amor fati, it's like it gives you this fire to make the most of whatever limited time you have. Okay, so then he, to relate to that last paragraph, Campbell quotes Euripides again from the Cretans. My days have run, the servant I, initiate of Idaean Jove, which I think is Jupiter, or like Zeus, where midnight Zagreus roves, I rove. And I believe Zagreus is like his, that I'm pretty sure that is another representation of Dionysus here. So where midnight Zagreus roves, I rove. I have endured his thunder cry, fulfilled his red and bleeding feasts, held the great mother's mountain flame. I am set free and named by name, a Bacchus of the mailed priests. Modern literature is devoted in great measure to a courageous, open-eyed observation of the sickeningly broken figurations that abound before us, around us, and within, where the natural impulse to complain against the Holocaust has been suppressed, and that's lower H Holocaust, just like, life itself is a never-ending Holocaust. We all die. It's a funny way to think about that, actually. It's like, history is just a tremendous Holocaust, like billions or trillions of people. Where the natural impulse to complain against the Holocaust has been suppressed, to cry out blame or to announce panaceas, the magnitude of an art of tragedy more potent for us than the Greek finds realization. The realistic, intimate, and variously interesting tragedy of democracy, where the god is beheld crucified in the catastrophes not of the great houses only, but of every common home, every scourged and lacerated face. And there is no make-believe about heaven, future bliss, and compensation to alleviate the bitter majesty, but only utter darkness, the void of unfulfillment, to receive and eat back the lives that have been tossed forth from the womb, only to fail. What do you think there? That's quite a lot to digest, huh?
I agree.
What's that saying? You can only, when you face death, you can only, or how does that go? You can laugh back. You can only laugh back. That makes sense.
I guess the older I get, the more I feel that way. I just laugh.
Yeah.
That's what we're gonna see here. Tragedy and comedy, they're two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
But it's like, that we are all. Some people are gonna hate me for saying this. Sorry, guys, but we're all victims of a Holocaust that is unfolding right now, and it always has been. It's like, we're all gonna die. Like that, like life. It's like, life is suffering, like the Buddhists say. I mean, like a lot of religions say, suffering, pain, and then we die. That's unavoidable. Some people think we can escape it, but the only escape I see is death. But in the meantime, maybe there's something. In this paragraph, he sounds quite. It almost sounds pessimistic, right? Like, in the face of this just ongoing. It's a terror. It is. It's like, what are we here for? Well, we're here to suffer and die, and it's going to rip us all to pieces, and it's going to be painful. And that, like, it's almost like the bull sacrifice, or I mean, all these sacrifice cultures throughout history. Maybe he's saying it almost represents. It's like that is a representation of us. Like we're each going to be sacrificed, and then culture thrives on our dead bodies, literally. We're buried under the earth.
Like that's true, Cody. Like that's nature. That's the universe. Like that's a universal truth. Like we're all going to die.
Yeah. It's this ever-consuming beast that it will eat us all. Yeah, and he says there's no make-believe about heaven, future bliss, or compensation for that, to alleviate the bitter man. It's like the ultimate black pill. This is like, you're gonna die, and who knows? I mean, it just may fade to black, and there's nothing, and the worms will just eat you. Just utter darkness, the void of unfulfillment. But still, in a bigger sense, it's like, I mean, that's what we're participating in. That's what everyone has participated in for all time, and like that's also the revivifying thing, like without death there can't be new life. I mean, it's interesting when I started gardening, I think you put dead things and shit in the garden, and it makes new things grow. Like, so literally, like everything that grows, it grows on death, and without the dead, decomposed things of the past, we wouldn't have new life. We wouldn't have a food source. And maybe it's a little mean, but it's like, even the vegetarians are still, or the vegans, you're still eating life, and like there is no escaping that. In order to survive, we eat each other, or like it's horrible, but it is the way of this universe.
You mentioned, like, so you've got dead stuff you're throwing into your garden, making it grow, and it's always like you got the fires that are happening right now, the wildfires, and supposedly when they regrow, it's more green and more lush than it was ever beforehand. With I guess everything burned, and just brings back more vibrant life.
It burns all the dead grass and wood and cleans everything up.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like it makes me think of like the sacrifice rituals of the past, and I mean, they still happen in some cultures today. And I personally, I think that's, what am I trying? I'm not like an advocate of that at all. I think it's quite monstrous, but it brings maybe more context, right, or more meaning to that idea of sacrifice. It's like, something has to die for something new to be born. Like that's a scary thought, but it does, in my mind, it kind of it brings more meaning to what sacrifice means, I suppose, like literal sacrifice especially. But I think it's best that we try to make our sacrifices, in a more metaphorical today. Anyways, let's get back to Mr. Joke here. In comparison with all this, our little stories of achievement seem pitiful. Too well we know what bitterness of failure, loss, disillusionment, and ironic unfulfillment galls the blood of even the envied of the world. Hence we are not disposed to assign to comedy the high rank of tragedy. Comedy as satire is acceptable. As fun, it is a pleasant haven of escape. But the fairy tale of happiness ever after cannot be taken seriously. It belongs to the never, never land of childhood. It makes me think of Peter Pan. Which is protected from the realities that will become terribly known soon enough. Just as the myth of heaven ever after is for the old, whose lives are behind them and whose hearts have to be readied for the last portal of the transit into night. I like that. Which sober, modern, Occidental, by the way, Occidental, you could just translate that as Western. Sober, modern, Occidental judgment is founded on a total misunderstanding of the realities depicted in the fairy tale, the myth, and the divine comedies of redemption. These, in the ancient world, were regarded as of a higher rank than tragedy, of a deeper truth, of a more difficult realization, of a sounder structure, and of a revelation more complete. Yeah, so it's like, there's the childhood version, right, of a comedy. You're saying it's like, yeah, these can be a pleasant haven of escape. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I had that thought relating to like Peter Pan. He's like the little kid that doesn't want to grow up. And he's living in a delusion essentially. Like, it's really interesting when I go back and with my son now. I'm watching like there's a lot of old Disney that I still love, like Peter Pan or Pinocchio or Lion King, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, like even as an adult, you glean a whole different set of lessons out of it, or maybe more meaningful lessons. But
yeah, going back and reading some of the books with my son, like Peter Pan and everything like that, I kind of, I didn't know that. This is what it's more about. I mean, I just kind of, whenever I'm younger, I really didn't pay attention to the whole, I mean, okay, not wanting to grow up and basically being, I guess, just staying a kid and not really having to face anything in the adult world. And I really wasn't. I guess a couple months ago, I started reading that book with my son, just little bitty short stories with him. I was like, huh, that's interesting.
yeah.
I really didn't pay attention back whenever I was younger to it.
Well, yeah, even like, yeah, kids' stories or fairy tales. It's like, I think that's a good, like a metaphor for all of these things, for myth at large, for our religions too. It's like, I think a lot of people, it's, they those stories often are so complex and deep that they can be interpreted on many levels, oftentimes, right? And yeah, depending where you are in your life and your psychological development, I guess, it's like, yeah, you're gonna see it, you're gonna read it, and you're gonna interpret it as one thing. But then, yeah, like you say, you revisit it years later from a different stage of your life, and it's like, whoa, that's a totally different thing than I remember, right? And I would personally, I think, like, I would relate that to like the Bible, or any other great religious tradition. But it's like, for me, yeah, the Bible is one where it's like, when I was growing up, I was interpreting those stories as, from a child's perspective. And I think a lot of people reject it in their older age because that's what they got. It was like the kids' version. And it's like, yeah, those fairy tales. But if you go back and you actually read the source material, I mean, I'm not going to tell you how to interpret it, but I would just say it's like, yeah, there's many levels. And I think it could be interpreted from many different perspectives. And any story, you go back to it, and if you've done some growing, some personal growth, like every time you read a good book, the book changes, it grows with you. The classics, at least. And yeah, so he's talking about, yeah, there's the more kind of not, what's the word I'm looking for? The more adolescent, I guess, perspective on some of like the tragedy and comedy stories and mythologies, and then there's the more mature, versions. And yeah, as we age, we maybe focus on different things, or we draw different lessons from these traditions.
It's almost like sorry, Cody. It's almost like these Disney movies. They're almost like preparing us to what is going to happen. They don't say death, but you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's almost like they're trying to teach us. That's the word I'm looking for. How to, almost like a blueprint Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The good ones, yeah.
yeah, you know, like how life is, and you know, from a kid's point of view, or from
Well, actually, even to go back, like Lion King is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Like as a kid, that was one of my absolute favorites.
Actually, if you watch that again when you were a kid, like I wasn't a kid when that came out, but I have a younger brother. I remember, I'm like, oh man, you know, like when Simba's dad got pushed, you know, like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Or even actually, even Bambi. You know, both of those start with like the death of a parent, and then you kind of trace like the child's growth from immature to mature. You know, to growing into like taking over that role that their parent fulfilled originally. But, Eric?
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I'm not great with words, but that's what I was trying to get at. It's like it's almost preparing us. You know, it's planting the seeds a little bit.
Yeah.
Every time I read I guess it's more of a Disney story now. I guess similar to, or after hearing stuff about like Epstein and all that stuff with puts Disney in the dirt. It's just kind of thinking when I'm reading it, how much of this is like how much of this is really twisted, and we're just accepting it as a children's story and reading it through that, but it actually has underlining meanings of it's just molesting and doing so many different things to children. I just like when I'm going through reading these things, I'm just like, well, I wonder if this has a different meaning than what I have in my mind about it, if that makes sense.
I think sometimes there is that. I mean, it makes me think of like Grimm's fairy tales. Did you ever read like those old classic? I think it's come from the German culture, but I mean, a lot. And it's funny. Grimm was the two brothers' last name, but a lot of those are what we would call quite grim. Like an old witch wanting to cook kids in the oven, for example. I mean, you go back and to me, some of them, I'm like. Or even I guess Pinocchio, like he gets basically kidnapped and taken away to Pleasure Island, and like given booze and cigars and who knows what. I think there's some, to me, I interpreted like there's quite a dark side there.
Well, then you got all your
almost traumatizing, but at the same time, like it's I think there is value. Like sometimes, I feel like certain tales are twisted when a movie comes out or whatever. But also, like a lot of that darkness or that threat was part of the story, from the get go. And it's it's some of those things are scary, but maybe I guess what I'm trying to say is like even kids do need to be slowly taught and not exposed to, but they need to know that there are bad forces out there in the world, that there are people that mean to do them harm, and so I don't know. It's like sometimes you get those dark depictions, but I think kids need that warning too, and often like Pinocchio, what was it? It's like Honest John was the fox who comes along. That's his name, Honest John. And he's basically he's a marketer. He's like selling them his story, and then he basically steals him away into slavery. And it's like that actually is an important lesson. Some people are going to come into your life and they're going to like offer you candies or something, like they may seem like a good guy, but they're not, like that's something I think kids do need to learn, right?
And not to get too far off topic, but then you got also like nursery rhymes and everything that are really like not, it's kind of when you read through it all, and this really isn't the best thing you'd be thinking about for like a baby. And then on top of that, you've got some of the stuff that kids dance around to or whatever, the ring around the roses. And it's just like, was it the black plague or the plague or what was it about that basically shits back in history where everybody just dies and when we all fall down? Anyway.
Yeah, I forget exactly what it is, but I'd heard that, as well, that it's kind of the origin is from the Black plague, when people would develop like a literal dark ring around some part of the body that meant that they maybe had the plague, and then they burned the bodies, which is the ashes, we all fall down. Yeah, it's pretty dark. But the same, but you know, do you see what I'm saying? It's like I've had that thought many times. Yeah, as a father, you kind of want to protect your kids, especially young kids, from the darkness of the world, but also, you know, you can't protect them forever, and you don't want to keep them in a bubble, you know, a delusion. It's like, yeah, unfortunately, the reality is the world we live in. There's there's evil people, you know. There's people that, like I say, they wear a mask of, you know, a smiling mask, but underneath it, you know, they're not they're not your friend. They have some ill will, and yeah, and there's many threats, and there's, you know, sufferings that we'll all have to go through. So I guess the more I learn and delve into this mythology stuff and looking at old fairy tales, it's like
the wolf in sheep's clothing. There's a
right. Yeah, exactly. But it's like, yeah, there's a you know, gradually you do need to expose your kids, I guess, to more and more of the uncomfortable reality of the world, right? So I look at a lot of those fairy tales as maybe a good step, or a necessary step in that direction, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so back to Campbell here. The happy ending of the fairy tale, the myth, and the divine comedy of the soul is to be read not as a contradiction, but as a transcendence of the universal tragedy of man. And actually, that's what he's getting at. You know, like Dante's Divine Comedy, where he goes through purgatory and hell, and eventually comes up to paradise. You know, the Divine Comedy, it's kind of positioned as, or labeled as a comedy, not because it's funny. You know, it's not like going to make you laugh out loud, but it's about the overcoming, you know, like the self-transcendence by going through the depths of hell. In that case, you know, eventually he finds a ladder, I believe, that leads out up into paradise. And so, yeah, that's the transcendence of the universal tragedy of man. That transcendence, like, that's, I guess they would, like, the story of Jesus is technically a comedy because he overcomes the world through his death. You know, it's not strictly tragedy because it's not focused on just the suffering and the failure, but it's actually a success in the end.
Mm.
The objective world remains what it was, but because of the shift of emphasis within the subject, the objective world is beheld as though transformed. Where formerly life and death contended, now enduring being is made manifest. And I was, you know, enduring whatever that spiritual or essence, that energy that endures forever. As indifferent to the accidents of time as water boiling in a pot is to the destiny of a bubble. That's, you know, like the universe doesn't care about us. You know, it's going to eat us all. But we're also all part of it, you know, like we're all part of the dance, if you will. Yeah, as indifferent as the cosmos are to the appearance and disappearance of a galaxy of stars. Tragedy is the shattering of the forms and of our attachment to the forms. Comedy, the wild and careless, inexhaustible joy of life invincible. Thus, and actually, that makes me think of, oh, come on, why am I drawing a blank? What's the guy from the Odyssey? Or he in Troy, you know, he's like the Ares spirit warrior. Why am I forgetting his name?
Achilles?
Hercules, is that it?
Achilles?
Sorry, Achilles. Yes, Achilles. Yeah, that's the one. You know, I mean, yeah, he almost had this like Campbell says, this inexhaustible joy of life invincible, right? Like he was invincible storming into battle because he just wasn't focused on himself as a mortal being. He was more in tune with, you know, what he saw as the gods, right? Like he was a manifestation of the gods. Like that was his whole mindset, his attitude, his identity almost, right? He would just go out there and slaughter, and he was just about invincible because he had identified with like the bigger story, not just with his little temporary body. Thus, the two are the terms of a single mythological theme, an experience which includes them both and which they bound. The downgoing and the upcoming. So the tragedy and the comedy. You know, the tragedy, like he says, is the shattering of our temporary concepts and how we think things work or should work, and the upcoming is the overcoming, the transcendence of that kind of limiting mortal perspective. And this is actually interesting, you know, the downgoing and the upcoming, and he says in parentheses, cathodos and anodos. Cathode and anode, which is like the two ends of a battery, right? So thus the two are the term, tragedy and comedy, are the terms of a single mythological theme, an experience which includes them both and which they bound together. The downgoing and the upcoming, which together constitute the totality of the revelation that is life, and which the individual must know and love if he is to be purged, catharsis, of the contagion of sin and death. Yeah, just to go back, you know, so to purge ourselves of the contagion of sin and death, which is, you know, sounds very religious, right? But in a sense, that's what all religions are kind of focused on. Campbell, at least here, I think is asserting that maybe the deeper, more mature perspective on what that means is just, it is the acceptance of cathodos and anodos. It's like life or the universe is a battery, you know? Yeah, we go down and we come up. We have to accept that we're going to lose everything and we're literally going to be obliterated in our mortal form, but we can also overcome that by looking at it from the higher perspective and by like almost connecting with the gods or with the universal story, you know, with whatever is transcendent and eternal. And there is something that is eternal in this universe, be it just energy or who knows what. But yeah, to go back a few, you know, the contagion of sin, he says in parentheses, disobedience to the divine will. So again, like Achilles, right? Like he aligned himself with the divine will in his time and place, and then he was able to go out and like almost be invincible, you know, and just be like the wickedest warrior the world ever saw, you know, unstoppable. But you could also say, it's like, well, it may not be your particular conception of like God today in your time and place, but, you know, because his was, I believe it was Ares primarily, you know, it's like that warrior spirit or the god of war and death, you know, like, and that was his thing. And there is a place for that in the pantheon of the gods, I suppose. I mean, yeah, look, even if, you know, from a Jewish or Christian perspective, just look at your Old Testament, you know, God has that side too. And then when he says death, you know, in parentheses, he says identification with the mortal form. So death, he equates with identifying yourself as simply your mortal body, your temporary, your vehicle. But I think he's implying heavily here that there's something else to us, you know, whether it's inside or higher or God knows what, but there is something else, this animating force, this energy. But to identify just with your material avatar, I guess, you know, like that's to identify with death. Because yeah, if that's all you have, then you're not eternal, are you? What do you think? That's a lot of I've given a lot of my interpretations here. Hopefully I'm not straying too far from Campbell.
Like I've said this a couple times, and I believe that we're all energy, right, in the universe. So when we pass away, we just, go back to where we came from. Maybe start again if you're into that, if you believe that sort of thing. It's like we're spiritual beings in a meat suit. That's what my wife says. That's her analogy.
Yeah, I agree. I think, yeah.
We're
how-
beings in a human body.
Here for a temporary experience,
Yeah,
right?
here for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah.
I see.
And hopefully we learn something along the way.
Yeah.
I was gonna say on the next little sentence. What's interesting? I don't mean to jump ahead, but it says all things are changing, nothing dies.
Go ahead and read it. Yeah, let's go forward. You take over for that paragraph.
Okay. All things are changing, nothing dies. The spirit wanders, come now here, now there, and occupies whatever frame it pleases. For that which once existed is no more, and that which was not has come to be. And so the whole round of motion is gone through again.
Yeah, and that's from Ovid, Metamorphoses. So what's your thoughts on that, Eric?
The thought where all things are changing, nothing dies. And I guess it kind of goes back to what Rico was talking about. Maybe we're all just energy. It's just we're all are. So once our living form is our vehicles are no more, we're still in existence. Nothing dies.
It just changes. That's what I get out of that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be the same person, but not the same person. Like you're going to take what you learned in this life to your next one. That's the way I kind of see things. Like you said, the spiritual DNA, ancestral DNA, or whatever you want to call it, spiritual energy. That's where I really believe that, actually. So that's where I kind of get from reading that. That's what I get from it.
It makes me think of a couple things. One, almost like I hope this is relevant, but in my mind, yeah, it made me think back to, I forget if we had started our call or not, but V for Vendetta. It says like you can kill my body essentially, right? But you can't kill an idea. Ideas are bulletproof. So in one sense, like, I mean, yeah, maybe we are in a sense like reborn, or maybe the Hindu idea of rebirth is true, but at the very least, or as the Stoics I think would say, like what we do today echoes in eternity, right? I think that was Marcus Aurelius. I think that was Aurelius who said that, like that our actions, whatever we choose to do or not do, in a sense, it impacts our kids, it impacts our grandchildren, and so on and so on. Like maybe not every little thing is, life or death, but yeah, who we choose to become and the actions we commit, like they do shape the world around us and they influence history. And yeah, the ideas we embrace or the things we stand for, even if we die, in pursuing our goals, our ends, it's like someone else kind of picks that up, and it's like, yeah, the human race. You can look at us strictly from the mortal perspective, the material perspective, and yeah, we're born and we die, right? But in the grand scheme of things, like you can also look at us as a species, or as a, throughout time, yeah, like things, it's like we're riding the waves of history and nothing can stop it, really, right? Like whether you and I live or die, like there's, yeah, we impact each other, and our actions do echo on, I guess. So yeah, energetically, I do think that there's probably a high likelihood that, like, even death, it's like maybe, I mean, it's a law of thermodynamics, right? Like energy never dies. So whatever it is that's animating us, I don't know how, but it transfers into something else. It becomes something else, like by scientific law. But you could all like maybe reincarnation is real. Maybe something is passed down in the DNA. But at the very least, I think it's hard to argue that we don't, like, our ideas and our actions and the things that we commit ourselves to, those do influence the world, at large, and we can, like, that's what's crazy, it sounds a little.
Look what's going on right now, though. Like, you actually, we're talking about life and death, like even what's going on in the world, with Corona, and, it's almost like the world's dying and we're going to be reborn. Like, it's not going to be the same, like I've said this before, right? Corona came from an animal or is man-made, but it's here, it's almost like the world needs to be cleansed, it's almost like a rebirth,
Yeah.
Humans, like I've said this before, and I'm not preaching and I'm not a vegetarian or anything, but you kill 68 billion animals a year and you don't think there's going to be repercussions on that. You destroy, I'm not trying to get into this political, that you're destroying the rainforest. You don't think there's not going to be any consequences. Global warming, if you choose to believe that or not believe it or whatever, like what's happening. There's consequences to humans' actions. And I think, I think part of what's going on, is that I'm not saying death as a metaphor, like people have to kind of wake up to see what's the new reality, because I don't think it's going back to the way it was. But that, like this, it's just recycling again. Mm-hmm. Like this radio, that's what I was kind of going. Like, I'm not trying to get into this Corona and everything else, but it just seems like, it's this rebirth and regeneration and death, and it's like it's everywhere. There's patterns, in everything. If you actually look for it enough.
Well, it's wild, because I think we are living in mythical times. Like, I mean, even the fact that that it's called Corona and which means crown. It's weird to me, but I think it is. It's life's. What's that?
I said we can get into all, like I'm not here to preach. I'm just saying, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's for every action there's a reaction, and I think what's going on right now, like we're talking about death and rebirth and everything. I think that's what the world's going through right now. When the world was shut down, I can't remember the number, but the ozone, I repaired itself somehow, or it was a lot. Like the
forests and stuff. A lot of driving started flourishing again.
Yeah, nature started, is all like regenerate. I even noticed around here, there's a lot more animals about because people weren't around, right?
Yeah. But there's always this delicate balance too. It's like we don't want to let the wolves take over again.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's crazy. You speak of like we have so many, deer and stuff now, just because people weren't out and about. They had more freedom to do what animals do. Yeah. So,
Well, I think in the grand scheme of things, I just frame it as it's life's challenge to us, like wherever it came from. This pandemic thing, at least, it's like I think it is. It's forcing all of us to many against our will, but to look at the reality of death. Like, you're gonna die. First, you have to know, not fear, but know that one day you're going to die. Reevaluate what matters and reassess. Like the delicate balance in everything. Us with nature, us with each other. Like, I mean, can we? Oh, it's like this is a turning point, and we'll see what happens. But I think the universe itself almost has issued us a challenge. Okay, you need to figure out, can we work together to maintain the world, and to maintain balance, or are we gonna rip everything apart? Like, are we gonna hate each other so much and blame each other to the point where we tear it all to pieces, or or yeah, maybe we should look at ourselves, you know, and go inside and do some work on ourselves and recognize how, yeah, like you say, every action has a reaction, you know, everything we do influences the world around us. And yeah, maybe it's time to reassess that and take more responsibility, right? So yeah, who knows? I mean, it's definitely a crazy period of transition. It's gonna be a bumpy road, I think, and who knows what the world will look like when we come out of this. But I don't know. I mean, I guess that's, you know, yeah. Looking back at history, there were rocky times like this before, where things did change pretty drastically in certain time periods, right? And it looks like we're going through one of those now. But you know, you guys on our private calls, like you know how I relate to like the king or kingdom kind of archetype, and I do find it fascinating that it's Corona. I think it's whether it's people doing this or it's just like the nature of the universe. It's like whispering, like, yeah, like who will wear the crown, you know? Like, are you gonna act like a king?
Yeah.
Are you gonna act like royalty? Are you gonna take the responsibility that comes with that? Like, if you want to keep your little kingdom here, or are you gonna maybe give your crown away to someone else and live like a slave, you know, or live in fear? I think like that seems to be the question. That's what I feel like God is asking me, you know, like, yeah, are you gonna act like it, like you deserve it, or are you just gonna act like a little farm animal? I don't, you know,
I think it's a big test. Like, you know, like it's like nature. It's not getting back at us, but it's like, hey, I'm here. Like, quit screwing up. That's, you know, and like I'm not a Greenpeace or anything like that. I really feel that, you know, after everything that's been going on, it's just kind of something inside of me that I was never that type of person either, you know. And it's like, yeah, like what's going on is like, I think this is we're not being punished per se, but it's a test to see how we're gonna. Maybe there's some aliens up there looking down on us, pulling the strings and seeing how we're. I don't know, you know. So who knows?
Interesting. You mentioned aliens. You know, supposedly the what is it? Just I guess the government here in the U.S. is trying to figure out what they can release on what UFOs and what they know. So they're trying to distract us from something else, right? They're trying to just put our attention put towards something else so they can do something else that screws us up. I don't know.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of chatter about that stuff in the last couple of years, more and more. But yeah, I personally think it's probably a distraction, like you say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, look over there! It's aliens.
Yeah.
Who knows, man? Who knows?
Like I mean, not to get too far off topic. I do believe there is existence outside of us, and I do believe in God, but there's nothing in the Bible that says that we're the only ones that were created.
Well, I think it's a like I said, it's a mathematical probability there is somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, it's a fact. Like it's an irrefutable fact. So.
Well, we are getting off track now. Now we're going into alien territory. I mean, yeah, who knows? It's you know, I do. Here's what I'll say. I think like archetypally, yeah, you know, for some people, like you in my mind, when some people talk about aliens, it could almost be interchangeable with, you know, spiritual beings or, you know, interdimensional beings. Some people say it could be demons or angels. You know, it could be like the Greeks would have called it the gods. You know, the pantheon of the gods. But I mean, every worldview, I suppose, has some. You know, they are archetypes. It's like, yeah, maybe there's something above us looking out for us, or maybe wanting to imprison us. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, I do think that there's definitely forces of the universe, you know, there's something out there. There's more than meets the eye. That's all I know for sure. There's more than meets the eye. I think,
I mentioned in the previous call about like I think the pyramids and everything, how they're basically, we can't replicate the way they are today. And what if we were, I guess, those aliens? We just lost the ability through the generations throughout the generations. We lost the ability to our mental ability or whatever, our powers. I don't know. It's kind
Yeah.
of okay. It's kind of stupid, but
We may find some of that eventually here, looking at ancient cultures and religions. But yeah, I mean, I find that an interesting theory, at least. Yeah, I think I guess the more I study history, the more I feel like maybe we're almost de-evolving, at least the last couple centuries. Because yeah, there's a lot of ancient sites that like we still couldn't replicate them, right? I think yeah, or at the very least, like Graham Hancock, I think it was, and a couple other historians say, well, they think those sites are significantly older than the mainstream has been telling us for a while. And it's hard. You can't actually date. You cannot carbon date stone. That's the problem. You cannot carbon date stone. You can carbon date, the like dead, burnt material inside of the pyramids, but just because you can like say that a certain pharaoh was a certain 1,000 years old or whatever doesn't mean that was when the pyramid was built, does it? It could have been around for thousands of years before that too. Anyways, yeah, like people like Graham Hancock assume, he has a theory that like the pyramids or the Sphinx at least might be, I think it was more like 12,000 or so years ago, which would put like maybe pre the last ice age. So it's like, who knows, maybe we as a civilization developed, got really like even more advanced than we are today, like far more advanced. And we built these astounding civilizations and things that we still can't quite figure out or decode today. And then things collapsed with the ice age or some global catastrophe or whatever. And then we basically reverted back to caveman again and had to build up. And now we're looking at stuff from like the last rise in humanity or whatever. Anyhow, but we're getting off track. Fascinating stuff. But let me get back to the text. I wanted to, draw the parallel, like, yeah, I don't know. There's probably there's something out there, I don't know what it is, but I wanted to draw the parallel, like alien life or spirits or angels and demons, because the next sentence after the one you read there, he quotes the Bhagavad Gita, and it actually, like the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu mythology, has like the 1,000 faces of God, right? These 1,000 different manifestations of God, if you will. But and they are usually depicted as like demon faces and crazy things. I mean, maybe they were aliens, or maybe that you could equate them with that. But that's kind of why I wanted to make the parallel there. But so in Metamorphosis, Ovid says, all things are changing, nothing dies. The spirit wanders, comes now here, now there, and occupies whatever frame it pleases. So it's like, yeah, there's this energy that's tied maybe to something transcendent, something united, who knows, that's like temporarily having this experience in these little bodies. But for that which once existed is no more, and that which that which was not has come to be. And so the whole round of motion is gone through again. And then he quotes, the Bhagavad Gita, only the bodies of which this eternal, imperishable, incomprehensible self, capital S self, is the indweller, are said to have an end. So only the bodies are said to have an end. But the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindus would say that like every human, almost, essentially, is like a manifestation of the divine. All of the 10,000 gods are like different avatars. But the one capital S self, it's incomprehensible from our mortal perspective, but that's this eternal, imperishable thing that just lives forever. It is the business of mythology proper and of the fairy tale to reveal the specific dangers and techniques of the dark interior way from tragedy to comedy. Hence, the incidents are fantastic and unreal. They represent psychological, not physical, triumphs. Even when the legend is of an actual historical personage, the deeds of victory are rendered not in lifelike, but in dreamlike figuration. So he's saying like a myth is more representative of like, it is like a dream. It's the collective dream, you know, it's more of a psychological framing of, even when it's talking about historical events, it's putting them in a psychological context. You know, like even the Bible. When I first read the Bible, when I was 19 or whatever, I read the whole thing, and I was actually blown away at that time by how, because I studied history, there are countless events in there that do map onto history. You know, like, but they're also told as parables and in this grand narrative that, of course, it has a human psychological underpinning to it. You know, like we put our own stories. We put like that's the thing. Every news article you read has a narrative. You know, like we can't avoid putting things into these psychological narratives that we create. But yeah, like the myth is like this agreed upon communal dream, if you will, this grand narrative that at least we're striving to like to tell stories that unite us all, that tie us together somehow. Yeah, so sorry. Even when the legend is of an actual historical person, the deeds of victory are rendered not in lifelike, but in dreamlike figurations. For the point is not that such and such was done on earth. The point is that before such and such could be done on earth, this other, more important primary thing had to be brought to pass within the labyrinth that we all know and visit in our dreams. The passage of the mythological hero may be overground, you know, it may be a concrete journey, you know, through space, time and space. You know, it may be overground incidentally, but fundamentally it is an inward, into depths where obscure resistances are overcome and long lost forgotten powers are revivified, to be made available for the transfiguration of the world. So it's always like, even Russell Brunson talks about the hero's 2 journeys, you know, like from a marketing perspective. It's like, yeah, that when telling your story, there's the actual things that you did, like in the physical world, you know, the things you built, the places you went, the whatever challenges you face. But there's the inner journey. There's the journey of transformation. Like, how did you change? Who did you have to become to be able to, you know, overcome your challenge or to build your thing? And it really is, yeah, we have to unlock certain things within us, right, before we're able to take right action in the world, I suppose. But yeah, in doing that, you know, yeah, long lost forgotten powers are revivified within us to be made available, possibly, sometimes, for the transfiguration, the restoring or the improvement of the world at large. This deed accomplished, life no longer suffers hopelessly under the terrible mutilations of ubiquitous disaster, battered by time, hideous throughout space. But with its horror visible still, its cries of anguish still tumultuous, it becomes penetrated by an all-suffusing, all-sustaining love and a knowledge of its own unconquered power. So like through each one of us individually, when we take that hero's journey within, like we awaken that spirit in ourselves. And the more people do that, like that is life in the individual, life recognizing its tremendous power. Like we said before, like, yeah, like you do have the power to influence history, you know? Yeah, your actions will, in a sense, they will echo through eternity. And, you know, like, even though we're temporary and we suffer and we're all going to be torn apart and eaten up by the universe eventually, like, while we're here, we can awaken that hero within us and do something, you know, do whatever is most meaningful to you. Something of the light that blazes invisible within the abysses of its normally opaque materiality breaks forth with an increasing uproar. So light in the darkness. The dreadful mutilations are then seen as shadows only of an imminent, imperishable eternity. Time yields to glory, and the world sings with the prodigious, angelic, but perhaps finally monotonous siren music of the spheres. Like happy families, the myths and the worlds redeemed are all alike. And that brings us to the end of tragedy and comedy. What do you guys think? We got very deep there. So the Bhagavad Gita is here, let me see if I have this pulled up. You know, it's that's the story of Prince Arjuna, who is the representative of that king. I mean, he's a prince, but like that kingdom archetype again. You know, he's in charge of his kingdom, his people, his tribe, his community, whatever you want to call it, and he has the great responsibilities that come along with that. Like heavy is the crown, you know, or heavy is the head that wears the crown. And he's like looking out on his cousins and uncles who he's got to go slaughter, basically. You know, it's like these warring tribes, but they're related. And he's saying to what they called like the manifestation of one of the gods. Let me see. Krishna, his charioteer is like a manifestation of the god Krishna. I think he doesn't quite know that at first, but it kind of like he's got this like wise mentor, if you will, in the form of his charioteer, and he's responsible for going out into battle against his own family, his extended family, and you know, he feels like to save his kingdom, he's been charged with, basically, like I think he's looking at their army and his army, and he turns to Krishna, his charioteer, and he's like, we're going to slaughter all my extended family members. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, can we just lay down our arms and like go in peace? But it's like, you know, this is what it is, man. Like, it's horrible, but yeah, like we've seen in this passage here from the book, you know, life is in a sense like this ever unfolding Holocaust, as Campbell said, this tragedy. It eats us all alive, and sometimes even, you know, like in that story, the Bhagavad Gita, it's pretty fascinating. We'll get into it more, I'm pretty sure, as we press deeper into Campbell, but you know, sometimes the gods will that you do have to commit, I guess, atrocity. You know, you have to do some pretty ugly things from time to time, or just the way of the world. It's like, you know, sacrifices required, unfortunately, you know, and that one's deep. I am pretty certain that in the next chapters, like, Campbell will go more into depth about that story in particular. But I wanted to give a little context with the Bhagavad Gita, because that's why Krishna says to him, you know, it's like only the bodies have an end. It's like you're looking at it from a mortal, material perspective, and in that perspective, it's horrible. You know, it's disgusting, it's violent, it's almost unthinkable to have to like murder your own family in battle. Mm-hmm. You know, I hope none of us will ever have to face something like that. But in that story, you know, the God is telling him, it's like, no, this is my will. Like, you have to do this. I mean, you can either accept this task and be the hero and lead your kingdom to glory and do what is necessary, or you can you know, basically kind of be a coward and not face up to this task which has been assigned to you. You know, it's I mean, that puts it in very profound terms, I suppose, right? Yeah, like none of us will ever be in a situation like that. But it's this story of death and slaughter and yeah, like how the nature of the world sometimes is. It's like, well, we've all got to die, you know, and sometimes, yeah, difficult things have to be done for the greater good, I guess. Like that's crazy to think about, but often I think that's what the myths are showing us. They're trying to entail. So yeah, like you were saying earlier, because like in this time, it's like, I mean, I don't want to see anyone suffering. I certainly don't want to see people dying, but you know, from a grand narrative and a universal perspective, yeah, sometimes it's like yeah, we're killing nature, and sometimes it's going to turn back and kill us back, you know? I mean, nature is a violent place, and that's just how it is. And like, yeah, maybe some of us have to die or suffer to change our ways.
Like life is everything. Like I'm not, but it's like we're fighting something that we can't win, you know? Like, it's like people don't want to accept reality almost, you know? People are going to, as harsh as this sounds, people are going to pass away from this. This is the way it is. And, you know, and I'm not just talking, you know, Corona, like we've had other diseases, we've had wars. It's just the way, you know, maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, as harsh as that sounds. I don't know. I don't know the answers, but obviously, you know, I don't know. Like it sounds cold and calculating, but if you really look at it, you know, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
You know,
in this existence, at least.
Yeah. In this life, it's just there's no. You can, like.
It would be nice if disease were eradicated, right, and no one ever got sick, and we could all just live happy and pleasant for eternity. But that's not the world we're in, is it? Like maybe that's what heaven is, or you know, the next life, maybe.
And I think that's why a lot of people are having problems with what's going on too, you know. And it's like because they've never had, especially in the West, and I might get in trouble. It's like we have no hardship here. Like we do, but we don't. Like there hasn't been any, you know, famines, wars. Like hasn't really touched.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, we've had so much comfort for such an extended period of time.
And I'm not talking about, you know, Vietnam, Afghanistan, or Iraq, or anything like that. I mean, like a world war, like, you know, like, or, you know, a famine or a disease, you know, like, whatever.
Well, I keep thinking recently, like, I'm really starting to miss all my grandparents. And I mean, not that I didn't before, but I've been thinking about them all more and more, because it's like, yeah, they experienced like the Great Depression, you know, they experienced some real hard times. They experienced, you know, World War II at least, and like some very intense threat on a global scale. And yeah, but like for the last, whatever, at least 60, 70, maybe 80 years, it hasn't been that bad, you know, but yeah, like my grandparents and great grandparents, you know, they were like, that's the thing, hardship and suffering and all the darkness, all the evil, all the threats in the world. It's unfortunate that we have to have that, but at the same time, it makes us stronger. Like those who experience and go through those things and survive, you know, and overcome, they're such much more stronger people. And yeah, nowadays, like that's why I'm trying to build myself up, you know, because I realized a couple of years ago, like, yeah, I am a soft little piece of shit. I'm a fucking coward, you know. I haven't done anything, like, and yeah, if we saw, this was before the Corona apocalypse, but I saw it coming, you know. I knew that there's probably hard times ahead, and I would be unprepared. And it's like, yeah, nobody wants to go through this stuff, but in the grand scheme of things, having delved into the mythology and the hero's journey stuff, especially, it's like, yeah, it gives it perspective. It's like, well, at least, like, it gives us a reason to fight, to live, to survive. It's
almost like this is supposed to happen. You know what I mean? Like, like not Corona, but it's just like I think the world. Like I keep going back to that because I really feel it's like the world needs a reset almost because we've had it not too good, but it's just it's time.
I think it was too good. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's time. Nature, the universe, whatever you want to call it. It's the collective or whatever. It's just it's time to do something different because what we're doing is we're going down a road that's not good.
Yeah, and often in order to change, it's like we have to have our backs against the wall.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Like whoever would have thought, in 3 months the whole world economy is going to shut down. It's insane to think about. Who'd ever thought you'd never be able to travel on a plane or even leave your house? Or for some people, that's what I mean. People can't grasp. They can't grasp what's going on. They just think, we're gonna sit tight for another 3 months and everything's going away. It's not. So.
Well, and that's why I want to talk about this stuff, and like I know very few people are interested. Very few people are ready. I think there's plenty of people interested, but in like it's not a majority of people who are ready to look at the dark side and look inside themselves. But I think we need to. I do think this is a big key to unlock the next stage of our growth as a society, as a planet, as a species. But yeah, like we were saying before, like I see this Corona thing as like almost a challenge from the universe, if you will, like it's asking us, like how bad do things need to get before you will do the hard work and change, like that. It's like, it keeps putting on more and more pressure, turning up the flames, taking away more and more things from us. And it's like, how bad does it have to get before you guys will get your shit together, and take more responsibility?
Like starting a business, like it's like almost your rebirth, death and rebirth. I'm not going to lie, a little bit freaked out, getting back, the birth and like, it's like you almost have to become not a different person, but it's like you got to kill that Minotaur.
You do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's hard.
It is. It's changing your identity. It is.
Yeah.
The hero's journey. That's what it is.
Yeah, you're becoming a different person, but you're not a different person. It's always been inside of you. It's just the and even what's going on. We keep going back to Corona because this was it's like the fear. You have to get through this fear because if we don't, it's gonna get worse.
Right. Well, that's I think the longer we put it off, turning the lens inward, and doing that inner work, the longer we put it off, the more dire the circumstances.
It's like people are becoming more animalistic almost. It's like the animal side is kind of coming out. That's all in us. That's part of who we are. It's programmed into us, but it just but it kind of is freaking me out a little bit. Like I said that before, and it's like I think we need to come together and change. And like I said, I'm not one of these Greenpeace people or whatever, but I really feel like this was going on. So,
what about you, Eric? Any thoughts?
No, it's
on the chapter as a whole, on those concluding paragraphs. Did those two quotes back to back? The one that you read out from Ovid. Ovid, by the way, is interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
Metamorphoses and the Bhagavad Gita. Did whatever we discussed kind of put that in context? Did you get something out of those quotes?
Yeah, I did. And I was trying to figure out where I'm not sure if your book had I guess quotes like where they're from right there, or you had to look them up, but we have them in the back of our book. I was looking through, trying to find out where you're finding.
Oh, so
I guess,
do you have endnotes? Like
So all of ours is put almost towards the end of the book. We got a reference area. I guess we look through, and that 35 on the one that I read was back there, or 35 on the Bhagavad Gita or something like that.
It's got traditional footnotes, so it's at the bottom of each page. So I wonder, that's probably why we're having a different, like the pages, like.
Yeah, I think we're on 22 right now on ours.
So I'm on 20. Well, just ended on page 30 in this version. So yeah, interesting. I think mine has footnotes. You guys have end notes. Well, yeah, and it's hard sometimes because some of his footnotes are epic, man. There was one I think on our last stream that was like a page and a half long footnote, and so like there's gold to be mined in some of those too. So, but since I have them at the bottom of the page, I do my best to at least try to look down and say, should I, insert this or skip it.
Now, what you read in the last chapter, that like page and a half, that was in our book. It just wasn't. It wasn't taken. It didn't say like what it's from. We have to look that up in the back of the book, like where it's taken from.
It was I think it was the last. It was mostly Jung, although he quoted the one where I went on about Nietzsche.
Yes.
Bastian, Franz Boas, James Fraser, etc. So he goes on and on. Sigmund Freud. Anyhow. Well, do you guys have any concluding thoughts? This one was it gets pretty deep, but it really, tragedy and comedy is really painting a picture of how like those two are kind of the two sides of the same coin, if you will. And I think like that, to me, that's one of the things that really stands out to me about Campbell. And it strikes me as a very like Eastern idea, if you will, like, the Buddhists and the Hindus, like they're really that duality idea, but it's like inarguable. I mean, we live in a world where there's life and death. There's, darkness and light, heat and cold, male and female. I mean, like on and on and on, like you've got basically these two like polar ends of a spectrum or two dual principles, if you will, in almost every, and he mentioned in this section today about the cathode and anode, cathode and anode, like two ends of a battery. So you could look at, the body is a battery, and I think he's almost trying to paint a picture of like the universe itself is like a battery. There's a cycle, there's a charge that's running through it endlessly, and we're just little peons, I guess, dancing in that, and so in our limited perspective, it looks like we're being torn apart, and annihilated. But it's this endless cycle, sort of.
In that same section you had, you talked about the Occidental meaning, like Western world and everything like that. And I know I think the first little section, it talked about Occidental and something else.
So the old terms in, I did my degree in humanities and history, and before, I don't know, the 80s or 90s, every historian used to say Occidental and Oriental.
Oriental, yeah. Okay.
So the Occident is the West and the Orient is the East. And today, I'm just going to read it like it is. So please don't hate me because I'm reading Joseph Campbell from the 1940s, by the way, guys. Anyone tuning in. But today it's like there's kind of this, I don't know, those are I guess outdated terms, and we would just say the West or the East. I don't know what's the difference, but
well, one of the things that popped into my mind was in the Philippines. You got different areas. You have like Occidental,
right?
Like
they use those terms here,
So
or Norte or Del Sur, I believe they're from the Latin, I think. They're Latin terms. They're in Spanish and French and Latin-based languages. But I don't know. We get rid of old terms every couple of decades, just to confuse people, really. So that when I say Occidental, no one knows what I'm talking about. That's why I'm gonna do my best to translate for you youngins out there. It's like, no, never mind. I'll save that for another time. Some of the words these days have been turned upside down, but anyhow, do you guys have any other parting words before we go? I'll wrap up the broadcast at least, and you can stay
Okay.
on if you want, and we'll chat maybe a little bit if you have time. But yeah, so next time, for those of you tuning in to follow us, join us for part 3, the hero and the god. That'll be coming up next. But thank you guys for delving into this together with me today. Always a pleasure.
No problem.